very confused because I don't get a chance to like go out and be a human being very often. So the one weekend I get to go away, I get to come to Pittsburgh and celebrate with you people about what we love. Yeah, kind of great.
Are you guys having fun this weekend?
It just started. But you know, the funny thing is, I always sort of imagined in 1976 in December when they were shooting Dawn of the Dead, like why couldn't we all have been here then? Like when sneaking around the stores, and it's still, I forget, you know, you forget like, oh, this movie that meant so much to us was filmed. There's probably fake blood on the floor somewhere still.
It's amazing that we get to come here and do this.
Yeah.
You know, we're literally talking about, like I was saying earlier to them, we're talking about this film, and George was talking about what's happening around us while we're in the mall talking about it. It's sort of like,
it's kind of wild.
Like turtles all the way down. So, let me start at the beginning. What was it that got you into being a monster kid to begin with? Was it a gravitation, or was there an instance?
Well, there was a TV show called Chiller Theater that played when I was a kid, which was the greatest. It was before SNL was on. So on Saturday night at 11:30, they would play two movies. Bill Cardell was the host, who also, you know, subsequently, a lot of people don't know, but Bill Cardell had a lot to do with George Romero and his, you know, getting funding to make movies in town. Not a lot of people know that Bill Cardell was kind of a big part of the Romero family. So I watched Chiller Theater every Saturday night, and it was all monster movies all the time. And that's really, between that and like reading Famous Monsters magazine, that was kind of the stuff that got me into it. You know, when I was a kid, I loved Star Trek and Lost in Space, so I thought for a while I wanted to build miniatures. Like I wanted to make spaceship models, and then like, you know, the Irwin Allen movies came out, Towering Inferno, and I was like, oh, I want to build miniatures and just blow them up. Then Jaws came out, and then I was like, well, I want to make sharks, because there was a cool shark, I want to build a shark. And then I saw Dawn of the Dead, and then I went, wait a minute. So that was kind of it. Guys, come sit down, don't be shy. Get over here.
So, what was your introduction to George specifically?
Okay, so I feel like a lot of my career has been that really unique sort of happenstance situation. There's two instances. So George Romero was in Rome working with Dario on Dawn of the Dead. And my family, we went for a summer vacation. And we're sitting in a restaurant, and George Romero was sitting on the other side of the restaurant. And my brother, who's around here someplace, there he is, we were walking out of the restaurant, and Brian ran over and said, hey, George Romero, and George stopped, and I ran up and said, hey, my uncle is Sam, who was in the Crazies, and so George knew my uncle. So it was literally a happenstance meeting in a restaurant in Rome, Italy, which is my first meeting with George. And they said, oh, we shoot, you know, our office is on Fort Pitt Boulevard, you should come down and visit. So I would go visit. Then they started shooting Creepshow, and they offered me a job as a production assistant. They said, hey, you know, do you want to come work on the movie? Because George was like that, like it was kind of all one big happy family. And I said, well, I'm getting ready to go away to college, so probably not, but I'd love to visit. So I visited the warehouse, which was about 15 minutes from here, and the sets were built in the gymnasium of this old high school, and the production office was in the high school. So I went a bunch of times, Brian went with me a bunch of times, and so that was really my introduction to the movie business. You know, you walk into this gymnasium, empty gymnasium, and you walk around the corner, all of a sudden you're in the set from The Crate, with like the tile floor, and there was blood smeared on the ground. I'm like, what the hell happened here? It was like really exciting. And that's when I met Tom Savini for the first time. His lab was off in the corner. So I would drive out there on Saturdays and hang out in Tom's lab while he was building Fluffy and all that kind of stuff. So the irony was, what started as really a hobby for me, something I was interested in because I had read the magazines and watched the movies. All of a sudden, in a 300 or 400 mile radius, I found the two people that could influence my career, which was George and Tom.
Amazing. Now, you said you weren't sure you were going to be able to because you were going off to college.
Yeah.
Was your college trajectory in any way geared toward the arts?
No, I was pre-med. I was going to be a doctor. And so I minored in art, so I did a lot of drawing and sketching and stuff. And then the irony was, a couple years later, it was the summer, I can remember the date, it was July 23rd, 1984. I got invited down to have lunch with George, and he said, hey, we just got a green light to do Day of the Dead. Do you want a job? And I went, okay, this happened once before, and I turned it down. I'm not gonna make the same mistake again. So I immediately said, well, I wanna work with Savini. Because at that point, Tom and I had been friends for 3 or 4 years, so I said, I wanna work with Tom. And I went back to my parents' house and said, hey, I'm gonna take a semester off of school and go work on this movie. And then I'm gonna go back and finish. That was my original plan. I just thought, I'm just gonna try it, see what happens. And that's what I did. And here I am.
And some stuff happened in between.
Yeah. And then there was about 800 movies and a lot of TV shows and a lot of stuff.
Looking back over the films, is there a particular film that still resonates with you that may surprise people? Or are you like, I did something that's not necessarily gore related, that may not be that was, the most obvious?
Oh shit, sorry, this microphone hates me. Well, when K&B first started, we started in February of 1988. And the movie that really put us on the map was Dances with Wolves. One of our first jobs was a movie that Disney did called Gross Anatomy. And it was Matthew Modine and Daphne Zuniga, and we got hired to make autopsy cadavers. The movie was about people going through medical school and taking the cadavers apart.
Tom has one of those on the ceiling.
Tom has one. I gave Tom one of them. He has one. So the weird thing about it was Deborah Hill produced that movie. Deborah Hill, who produced all the Halloween movies, all of a sudden she's a big shot female producer in Hollywood. She's producing this movie, and she calls George Romero, and George says, oh, you should talk to this guy, Greg Nicotero, because he was pre-med before he got into makeup effects. So I went to Disney Lot, met with Deborah Hill, met with the director, and that's how we got that job. And in our next interview with Kevin Costner for Dances with Wolves, he looked at our portfolio and he said, these bodies look really realistic. There's a scene where we have these buffalo that they have to skin the buffalo and take all the hides off. You guys would be perfect for that. So within 2 years of K&B's introduction, we went from doing a little low-budget movie called Intruder to Dances with Wolves within 2 years. So we were able to transcend the gore genre horror stuff because our portfolio all of a sudden had fake animals and body replicas and things that a lot of people didn't realize at the time were prosthetic makeup.
Sure. And so suddenly you had this portfolio that wasn't just bullet hits and zombies that some of the
That's right.
other guys had.
Well, and the funny thing is, when we did Gross Anatomy, I went to the medical school in Long Beach, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do research and we're gonna look at real cadavers. I was like, okay. So we go there, there's myself, Donna, who was the medical advisor, it was like 10 people, and they pull this tray out, and it's a black body bag, and they go, and everyone's standing there going, what is this gonna look like? And they flip the top open. And it looked like a wax. Like now everybody's seen, the Body World exhibits where they all look like wax. Like, they don't look real, they look kind of fake. That's what the body looked like. This went, bloop. And I'm looking at him thinking, it doesn't even look like a real corpse. And I realized that when in the film industry, you sensationalize everything. Like, you really think if somebody gets shot, like it gets, like in Dawn of the Dead, the heads explode. There's a lot of sensational
Sure.
liberties that are taken. But I thought it was very interesting that the research that we had done was looking at this fake body, and I kind of went, "Oh, it doesn't even look real." But now that's kind of that was really what kind of set us apart.
Yeah, and it goes back to when you go to a funeral, it doesn't even look like her.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've done so much research about anatomy and all this stuff, and one thing is like when we try to do this on Walking Dead, and we did it a lot actually because of my pre-med background. A lot of the work that we do does have anatomical accuracies to it.
Sure.
And I remember there was a couple movies that we had interviewed for, and they said, "Your stuff looks too real. This movie's got to be more cartoony and be a little more out there." So we would lose jobs because our stuff had a realistic element to it. But I was like, well, that's my training. That's where I kind of got into it.
You brought up The Walking Dead. So at this point in your career, do you get more satisfaction from direction or special effects?
Well, that's a great question.
I know they're
No,
completely
they're different. There's. It's interesting because I was on set. We're shooting season 4 of Creepshow in Vancouver right now. Like, today is the end of episode 2, and I don't know when the air date is yet. But you guys, you already know that it's going on. But when I'm on set and there are other directors, and it's hard because I'm like, "You're doing it wrong," or "That's not how I would do it." Well, that's why you have other directors, because they have. Television's different than movies, because in television, the producer or the showrunner, you have to sort of service their vision of the show, and it's difficult because every TV show, like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, was Vince Gilligan. He was the showrunner. So when we did like Gus Fring's blown up face, it's not really a director's medium. Television's a producer's medium. The producers hire the director comes in, works 2 weeks and finishes it, and he leaves. It's the producers that have to
You're always at the side.
Yes, that's right. So with Creepshow, I'm the showrunner producer on that. But then on Walking Dead, I'm the executive producer and in-house director. But when you have meetings and you start talking about how we're going to do a specific effect, there's always that idea. It's like Mission Impossible. Everybody's sitting around a table trying to figure out how to do it. That's the most fun because you don't know how to do it. And when you read it, you sit around, you brainstorm a bunch of ideas. So I get a lot out of that interaction with artists. And then directing, of course, I enjoy it. I never thought I would be a director. Like, even people say, "Oh, you used to talk about it all the time." I'm like, I don't really remember talking about being a director. I feel like I kind of fell into it because of The Walking Dead. So it's but now I'm really grateful. I'm grateful that I'm able to create from A to Z different stories or different scenarios, like on The Walking Dead, and then of course on Creepshow and other stuff.
In Creepshow, having so many different types of stories, it allows you to try so many different things, I would imagine.
Well, that's the fun thing about Creepshow is I like to compare it to, like, you go to a restaurant, you don't know what you're in the mood for that night, so you're like, "Oh, I don't know what I want." So every story, it can be dark and twisted, it can be funny, it can be outrageous, and I'm really proud of the stories. I mean, that show has a minuscule budget. Like, one episode of Walking Dead is an entire season of Creepshow.
Amazing.
So we have a lot of people that are very ingenious, and the scripts that we have for this season are really, really fun stories.
And I love it stays so true to the playfulness and the spirit of the original film. Even though you'll go so many different directions, it still feels so much like it came from that world.
Well, we did. I don't know if you guys have seen. If you haven't seen Nicotero, you should watch it because it's really fun. There's one episode that I would encourage you to watch, and it's called Night of the Living Late Show. And Justin Long was in it, Darcy Carden was in it, and you know, when we would be working at the studio, we would always joke around about, like, if you could go back in time, what movie would you work on? And everybody would say Creature from the Black Lagoon, or King Kong, or Jaws, or so it's kind of like this fun little game you play when you're at work. Okay, what movie would you know, if you... So Dana Gould, who's a great comedian, wrote this story about a guy who invents a machine and you can go back into the movie. So I read the script, I fell in love with it. I said, all right, I'm gonna direct this episode. Justin was great, Darcy was great. We literally took a tanning bed and we made it into the Immerso pod, which was this silly machine. But we ended up, at the end, the character gets transported into Night of the Living Dead. So we rebuilt, we made a 2-walled set of the farmhouse. And the set decorators and everybody found reference photos of the Liberty Bell picture on the wall, and the couch with the doily, and the record player, and the door to the basement. So they recreated that set, because when Justin gets transported into the movie, I said, well, we could digitally put him in, but I wanted to do it for real. The day I walked in there, I freaked out. I called Russ Striner. I'm like, Russ, I gotta FaceTime you, what are you doing? And I FaceTimed him and I showed him the set. And I just thought to myself, it was so exciting because at that moment I realized I was transporting myself back into that movie, just like the characters were. And we shot that, it was probably only about an hour and a half, but I didn't want to stop. I kept trying to think of more shots to do that would be mimicked in using the Night of the Living Dead set. So I have great pictures on my phone of me sitting on the set, and we have little shafts of light coming through like they did in the movie. And it was so cool. And I said, I want to keep the set. I want to keep the set up and just like, and they're like, well, we rented all the furniture. You have to take the furniture back. And I was really sad because it was kind of cool.
You should have just bought it and put it in storage, right?
No, I should have. It could have been right here. I screwed up, sorry.
You said you guys joked about that. What would be the answer? What's the film you'd go back and remake?
Remake?
Yeah.
Oh, God. What?
People love What If. You know, what would it be?
Saying remake a movie?
Yeah, remake.
You know, I love John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. It's such a really weird movie that I think would be a great remake. And we've been trying to get the rights. I've been trying to make a TV series out of it with AMC, but there's like too many people. Getting the rights for things are a little tricky.
That's a Carpenter movie that doesn't get enough love.
It's just the idea that, oh, there's this church in Long Beach that's got this big canister in it filled with liquid Satan, and that it gets out. I'm like, I would see that movie.
And how do you wash off liquid
Satan? Speaking of liquid Satan.
See, I always wanted to see the Creature from the Black Lagoon remade, but only after I saw Bernie Wrightson's take on it.
Well, we talked about that. You know, when Universal got really excited about relaunching their dark universe, and they did The Mummy, but I know they did Bride of Frankenstein, which I haven't seen yet. They're still trying to do it. And at one point, Robert Rodriguez and I, because Robert's always wanted to remake The Creature, and I said, why don't we co-direct it? Like, we should go pitch. And I had a couple guys in the studio actually sculpt some busts. And then I think I did an interview, and they said, what movie do you want to remake? And I said, Creature from the Black Lagoon. And then the next day, like, it was all over every Hollywood newspaper that I'm remaking Creature from the Black Lagoon. I started getting calls from people, hey, I want to be in the movie. I'm like, I just was talking about a movie that I would, like Monday, there will be some article somewhere saying Nicotero's remaking Creature from the Black Lagoon.
It comes up now like finding London After Midnight Prince, right?
Right. But it's like, I kind of wish it was like the George Costanza Seinfeld thing where somebody sees it and actually thinks it's real. And then all of a sudden I have an office at Universal that I don't belong there. And I'm prepping Creature from the Black Lagoon, but nobody knows it but me. I could totally pull that shit off, too.
You should Seinfeld that shit into reality.
I'm gonna Seinfeld the shit out of that idea.
Have you guys got any questions?
Yes, young man.
Yes.
Did you have any problems on Tremors 4 and why?
Tremors 4. That's a really interesting question. So we did actually have a problem. I don't know, do you know a story or you're asking? So we built these big giant sandworms, of course. And then we had these little baby sandworms that get born and out of the ground. So they built this whole set about 40 minutes north of Los Angeles in the desert. And there was a scene where the big sandworm's smashing through the barn. And it was a really cool scene. And all of a sudden we were filming and there was a flash flood. And we all got trapped there. And we couldn't get out because the road had washed away from where we were shooting. So we were stuck there for like a day and a half with us in a barn with a giant sandworm. It's kind of weird. But so yes, we did. You must have been there.
You could crawl inside it and stay warm like a tauntaun.
We crawled in, yeah, we cut the side of it open and we said we thought these smelled bad on the outside and then we crawled in. It was great.
Yes, you do.
And then we ended up doing the TV show, because Sci-Fi Channel did a Tremors TV series, and it was a Monster of the Week. So we ended up getting the molds from Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff, who did the original Tremors, and we shot in Mexico, where they shot Titanic. So the studio, it's Rosarita Beach, where they shot Pearl Harbor there, and they shot Titanic. So they had this big museum, and in the museum was the 90-foot-long miniature of the Titanic. So we used to sneak in and look at all the models, because they built this massive, Jim Cameron built this massive miniature that was like 40, maybe it was like 60 feet long.
I love the idea of saying 90-foot miniature. That's awesome.
We have a question right over here.
So do you think the show Face Off is bad because it pulls the curtain back on the magic, or is it a positive because it gives fans an appreciation for the art and the effort that goes into it?
The second part. No, I do think it's, there's a lot of people that between Face Off and honestly, between Walking Dead and American Horror Story, like 13 years ago, a lot of people didn't really give a shit about makeup effects stuff because computers had really sort of taken over, the lion's share of the work. And then Walking Dead comes out, all of a sudden people are like, wait, how did they do that? It's like, well, it's makeup effects. Like this is an art form that has existed since the 20s, and now it's kind of being celebrated again. So much of the zombie makeups. So I feel like a lot of people, where's Desiree? She's around here someplace. Oh, maybe I scared her away. There's a lot of people that come up to my table to say hello, and they're like, well, I'm inspired by what you do. Just like I was inspired when I saw Dawn of the Dead, now people are watching Walking Dead and becoming inspired by the makeup that you can see on your TV every day. You don't even have to buy a ticket and go to the movies anymore, you can see it on television. So I was really excited about that. So when Face Off came up, Face Off was a lot of fun because it gives people that wouldn't normally have access to that, sure, like the ability to, like you said, pull back the curtain and go, oh, well, this is how, no, that's not really how it's done, because you have more than 24 hours to do, well, sometimes, to do a specific creature or an effect. But it's, it celebrates what we do.
Do you guys have more questions? I see a bit of trepidation, but I do see a question.
Oh, just raise your hand. My job is to scare people, but I won't scare you right now.
Hi. First things first. My mom's a really big fan.
I love how you did that.
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm calling you out anyway. This is just a really stupid question I thought of, but if you could have inserted yourself into any major horror movie series as any character, what would you do and why? Sorry, I thought it would be fun.
No, let me think about that, because, do I want to die in a movie? Probably not. I would say I would probably be. I'd love to be in the original Nightmare on Elm Street because that movie still is one of my favorite horror movies. But if I was, I'd be dead. I could be Johnny Depp, but then I would get pulled in. But you see, you never see him die. Now that I think about it, I think I want to be Johnny Depp in Nightmare on Elm Street because he goes through the bed and then a big hose turns on and shoots a bunch of blood out. But you don't know that he actually dies. Maybe there's like a fire extinguisher under his bed that had a lot of rusty water in it, and when he went through the bed, he broke it, and that's where the water.
He's fine.
That's what I'm gonna do. That wasn't a dumb question, by the way. I like that question.
To kind of play off that, you get that a lot from actors that are zombies that say, "Hey, I want you to kill me. You have to kill me," like as on screen. I always thought, as a fan, I'm like, that's what I want. I'd want to be killed on screen. But you get that a lot.
Well, it's tricky because, you know, Walking Dead, nobody ever wants to die. There was like maybe Jeff DeMunn in season 2 wanted to die. He's like, I think it's time for me to be off the show. Because there was a lot of drama with Frank Darabont and he said, I want... But I think he regretted it. Like the night we shot his scene, that was the first episode I ever directed. I think he felt bad. And I know there's other characters on the show and on Fear the Walking Dead, they're like, yeah, it's time for me to move on, I'm ready to go. And then the day we're shooting their scene, they're like, this is a terrible mistake. I'm like, too late now, and action. Sorry. And the funny thing too, there's kind of a funny thing too, which was Andy Lincoln would, every time, like with Michael Rooker, every time there was a character that was gonna die, we would always have a scene with Rick and the character. And he'd come over to me and go, man, that Michael Rooker, he's a great actor. We shouldn't kill him, we should keep him. Like, we already shot his death scene. Like, he's already dead. Like, I'm not gonna go But Andy would always come up, man, that's Sarah Kelly. What an actress. We killed her like a week ago. So I always find it funny that Andy would always be like, man, they're just really good. I don't think we should kill them. All right, sorry.
Was there a character that down the line, story-wise, you were kind of like, shit, we really shouldn't have killed that one?
I would have never killed Glenn. I would have never killed Glenn in a million years.
That would have been the best switch, but
we were hoping, you know, and the horrible part of the story was that day before that script came out, Michael Cudlitz came into my office, sat down, and he's like, man, I love this fucking show. This show is like the greatest job I've ever had. I really hope they don't kill me off. And I said, dude, you're not going anywhere. You're so talented. And then it's like, email, ding. Oh, hold on, the new script is here. Oh, shit. Abraham? I was so, like, shocked. And, you know, the Glenn thing, you know, I had dinner with Frank Darabont not long ago, and he said, he goes, listen, Walking Dead was never about that. Walking Dead was always about survival. And Frank had said, if I had still been on the show, I would have never killed Glenn. I think that was a turning point. And I agree. He was such a great character, and it really, look, I directed the episode. I'm the one that said, okay, hit him in the head with the baseball bat, and then let's pull his eyeball out, and let's do all this horrible stuff. Because that was what the script required. You have another question? He's dying over here.
You know what? I noticed that when Glenn was killed, I felt like the show was like, whoa, we're killing too many main actors that are likable. And I think now you're being very careful if you got somebody good, making sure they're lasting long enough to build a following as a fan.
Well, that's an interesting observation. You're not wrong, but it wasn't about, look, Glenn died in the comic book, and they felt that that's what they wanted to stick with. They wanted to stick with, the reason Cudlitz died was just to sort of trick the audience into thinking, oh, he's fine, and then, oh, he's not fine. But, you know, it's kind of hard to kill characters when they keep announcing spin-offs. with those characters before we've aired, because now people are like, oh, well, I guess they don't die because they're in their own show now. With Jeffrey, we were shooting the finale, and Jeff was like, Jesus Christ, did you know that they announced Isle of the Dead? And I'm like, well, I guess you're not dying in the episode then. So that's good for you, right? And he was annoyed because, you want the audience to, at least when they watch the show, feel that there's some jeopardy. If the characters aren't in danger, then
Yeah,
So-
when I heard the spin-off announcements, I was like, well, now I'm watching the show with a safety net, and it didn't feel there wasn't as much fun.
I know.
Yeah.
I agree. So I don't know when we're back on the air. I think October, and we have 8 more episodes. So I directed the premiere, and then the finale, 12-year finale, I directed for that. We have one more scene to shoot, which I have to go back to Georgia and film one more scene. But
Were there any reshoots?
no,
I mean, obviously you get
No, we just have one more scene.
Right, but I mean, as far as with what you were going to end the show on, was there any go back and
no. But it was. I'll be honest. It was probably the hardest 3 months of my life because I felt the pressure of taking the show out. Like 12 years of people watching the show, and you want it to be great. Like, look, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. When Game of Thrones ended, there were a lot of pissed off people. I was not pissed off because I'm like, hey, this is a journey. I'm on this journey, and whatever happens, and so many people that were so faithful to the book, like that was the worst season finale show ever. I'm like, I liked it.
I did too.
It didn't bother me.
I didn't like the end of The Sopranos, but I loved the end of
Well, see, then you have so there's so much that people put on the last episode.
Sure.
The last episode, like it would make or break how you perceive the entire show.
That's
Like
true.
one of my best friends, just watched The Sopranos, got the last episode, and went, screw that show. He was so mad that he went back and just retroactively hated every other episode backwards. He was so mad.
I'll be honest, I watched it in real time, and I sort of did the same thing. I was
Yeah.
like, God damn it, if you're going to drag me along, end it. Give me an ending.
Yes. So I had that in the back of my head every day on the set of Walking Dead. Like, oh my God, please! It's gotta be. And I fought really hard for the script. I fought really hard. The actors too. I mean, the actors all were like, man, this Scott's strong. We want it to be great. We were really, really fighting because I didn't want the audience to watch it and be like, that's it. So I threatened to quit twice in the middle of production. I was so freaking burned out, and it was really hard. So I get home at 3 in the morning and I'm like, find another director. Send. Like a 12-year-old. And then, of course, the next morning I'm like, why did I send that? Because by the way, they never looked for another director, so they knew I was full of shit. Which annoyed me because then I couldn't even pretend to quit because they knew I was full of shit. It was kind of annoying. But it's going to be great.
And it would be hard probably not to have an extra level of stress, because anytime you're doing any job, any project, you want to do your best work.
Yeah, it was stressful.
But you've transcended into a cultural phenomenon, and I'm sure that doesn't help when it comes to the stress pile.
We talked a lot about the 12-year journey. I mean, it was interesting. On the last day of filming, the editor put together 2 seconds from every episode, because we did 174 episodes. So they cut like a 3.5-minute clip. It was 2 seconds from each episode, and it's called The Journey. The Journey Begins, and I was stood there on set. Norman and Melissa were next to me. I got goosebumps. It was so cool, and I kind of looked at them and went, "Look what we did! Look what we did!" And then I said, "Look how good the show used to be," which was a lot better. Let's just be honest. But it was wild to be able to see 2 seconds of each episode all cut together. So I wish I could show. I mean, at some point, I would love people to see it, because it literally revitalized me instantly to be like, now I remember why I fell in love with working on the show, let alone watching it.
And you're right, it is the journey. It's not necessarily the ending, I guess, because lives don't necessarily always end at such a grand, ending. But it was a life well lived.
Yeah,
So
I tried to get them to play it. San Diego Comic Con's coming up, and I said, guys, you have to play that clip because every single person that has ever watched one episode of the show will be re-engaged by just watching that because it really was great. So maybe they'll release it in July. I'm hoping because it was pretty exciting for me, and I was burned out as shit. So
maybe they should
for me to watch it and go, hey, no, it's pretty good.
top of the last episode. That'd be cool.
It's gonna do it. So, I don't know what they're gonna do with it, but it was pretty. We played it at the wrap party, which was really fun, and then we played the gag reel, which is, I think one day they have to put all the gag reels out because there's some funny. They're in the middle of a scene, the airplane flies by, and the actors pull their guns out and start shooting at the airplanes. Because you can't have airplanes in the apocalypse. So there's some really funny shit.
Do you guys have any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there going to be any resolution with Daryl Carroll? And is Rick going to come back? Or can you tell?
Resolution in terms of what?
Daryl Carroll getting a spin-off? Or...
Oh. Well, I can't say. I can just say don't believe everything you read.
Okay.
That's all you gotta say. First of all, don't believe anything you read. Forever, for the rest of humanity. From starting from today on, don't believe anything anyone tells you. And especially Walking Dead.
So Greg Nicotero just said, without a doubt, there's another season.
See, don't believe him. See?
That's funny. That's funny.
What's that? Wait, hold on. Go.
I'm just being a smartass. He said it. He didn't write it, so I can believe it.
That's true. So you can believe it.
Oh shit.
Question down front.
But it's look. The universe is wide open, and that's the exciting part of it. Is knowing. I read the scripts for the Negan and Maggie spin-off because they're doing 6. It's like do 6 of this one, and 6 of that one, and 6 of this one, and 6 of that one, and then they'll kind of see how the Tales of the Walking Dead comes out in a month, which was they kind of took the creep show concept. It's anthology shows that are set in the world of The Walking Dead. But they're characters, I think there's one character from the show, but they're sort of standalone things, episodes.
That'd be cool.
And there's a really very, very cool Groundhog Day type episode where at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse and people keep reliving the same moment.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
It's kind of cool.
Oh, cool.
So
That's one of the best movies ever. Why not?
I
Pull
know.
from that.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to know any of this.
So when you're working when you're working on Creepshow and you have such a limited budget, I know that probably has its own set of challenges. Does working with such a limited budget though also kind of give you a special charge, like bringing you back to having to be as inventive as you were in the early days of your career?
Yeah, it forces. There's a great story that Rob Tapper, when we were doing Army of Darkness, they shot Army of Darkness. We shot right after they did Darkman. So when Sam Raimi did Darkman, Universal was like, "You can have as much money as you want. This is gonna be great." So anytime they would have a problem, they would be like, "Well, just bring out the hose that has all the money in it, and just hose down the problem with money, and the problem will go away." So then we did Army of Darkness, and there were problems, and Rob would say, "Hey, pal, sorry, we don't have the money hose on this one." And I'm like, "There's a money hose? Like, how do I get a money hose?" So it does force you to be ingenious and creative, because you have to come up with ways to shoot something that you can't just say, "Oh, well, we'll just fix it in post. Oh, we'll just do it later. Don't worry about it." you got to know what you're doing and you got to figure it out, and you have about 10 minutes to do it. Like every day I get emails from the set going, hey, so we have to trim, we have too much footage to shoot this day, so we got to cut some stuff out. So there was the scene we were going to shoot, we shot last night in Vancouver. They picked a location that was a parking garage where this vampire girl attacked somebody. And they're like, oh, well, it'll take us an hour and a half to move all the camera gear over. And I said, guys, we don't have an hour and a half, so just go out behind the studio and shoot our parking lot. You don't need to move to shoot in a park. Just go out there, put a couple dumpsters and some cars and a fence, and everyone went, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. So and part of the years of experience I have is I have to sort of guide production and go, okay, we have 11 and a half hours to film 10 pages of material. That's crazy. So I'm like, okay, guys, just do it handheld. Feel like it's a Law and Order episode, when the cop car pulls up and the cop gets out. What do we got here? Oh, it doesn't look so good. I said, shoot that scene, but just have it handheld. Have the camera guys hold the camera. The car pulls up. They go over to the guy. They go down to the body. They go back up to the guy. The guy leaves. And just do it in one shot. Have a second camera with another lens on it. So that's my job. My job is to sort of help the directors get. I hired these two girls. They're twins, named Kaylee and Sam Spear. They're young, up-and-coming directors, and they're directing this episode. And the poor girls are literally killing themselves to make this episode. But my job is like, okay, if you need to make your day, just be smart about how you do this. Be smart about how you do that. So yes, not having a lot of money does force you to be more inventive and more creative. Sometimes it's like, oh, you want to do a werewolf transformation? Well, we can't afford to do it. So maybe we'll be on somebody's face and we'll just project a shadow transformation. We did that at Shapeshifters Anonymous, and it was fun, and it worked great. So you're like, okay, we don't have $200,000 to build changeo heads and stuff. I said, just project it. We literally bought a little projector and we projected an animation on the wall. And it was done. Everyone's like, that was so smart. I'm like, I didn't have a choice. Couldn't afford anything else. I would have done shadow puppet theater if I had to. Like, oh, I'm a werewolf.
Sometimes your mind can fill in the blanks and you get a great scene out of it anyway.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to somebody the other day about Alien. When you watch Alien, you have no idea what that creature looks like. And, there's famous photos, and there's this whole thing where Ridley Scott, they put the guy in the costume and they sent him out the set. And Ridley Scott went, well, it looks like a guy in a suit. Like, I can see the guy. So the reason they shot that creature the way they shot it was because he wanted the audience to not know what it looked like. You can never shoot a wide shot of this thing, because if you shoot a wide shot of it, then the audience can process like, oh, okay, I can see there's a guy there, there's his hands, So you shoot little pieces and you let the audience build it up in their head. So I'm telling the creep show guys, I'm like, don't shoot the whole pie. Shoot little pieces of it, and let the audience put it together. It's kind of fun.
I'll pose the question to you. I've asked a lot of people in these shows. We're in the mall 40 plus years after Dawn. Coming up on 55 years at night. What is it about this type of film that causes such a reaction? We're not here about, the Titanic. We're not here about Gone with the Wind. We're here about zombies.
Look, I feel like a lot of filmmakers at that time, Tobe Hooper, Wes Craven, Sean Cunningham, John Carpenter, there was a very fierce, independent nature to what they did. Everything they did was subversive. Like, you couldn't, Texas Chainsaw Man. These things were so taboo. And these filmmakers all took on this sort of taboo subject matter that everybody told them no one wants to see that movie. Nobody wants to see that movie. So you have these people that they're like, well, screw it. That's the story I want to tell. That's the movie that I want to make. So there's something about that independent, rogue attitude that all those horror directors had in the late 60s and early 70s that I think transferred through the movies. So the reason that people love Halloween isn't it because there's not one drop of blood in Halloween, which still people don't realize when you watch the original Halloween. There's not one drop of blood. That wasn't the movie John was making. They had what, $200,000 to make that movie, I think. But it was that fiercely independent. Oh, well, the big studios won't give us money because they don't think this will work. Well, I'm going to show them it's going to work. I'm going to make this movie. I'm going to make Friday the 13th. I'm going to make Halloween. I'm going to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm going to make Night of the Living Dead. All of those movies, all were made by people who were told, you can't make this movie. So that independent spirit really plays out. Now you're walking around, there's 5,000 t-shirts that spawned an entire generation of people who were somehow or another, said, we're told you can't make that movie. No one's gonna see it. When Dawn of the Dead came out, they wouldn't even play it in movie theaters. They wouldn't play the trailer until after 11 o'clock at night because the movie wasn't rated.
Right.
So if you wanted to watch a trailer for Dawn of the Dead, they wouldn't play it on TV because it said, even though there's no explicit violence in this movie, no one under 17 is admitted. Now there's stuff on TV that's way worse than half the movies that came out in the 70s. So you made it. What's that? And it's part of it is my fault. Because when we did Land of the Dead, George was very, very concerned about the rating on Land of the Dead. So we shot zombies on green screen, just walking left, walking right, walking forward, so that if he needed at any point to stick a digital or a green screen zombie in front of something for a split second, that would allow him to not have to recut the movie. If there was a gag that was too gory, then you could just have a wipe in front of the camera. But then Walking Dead, the first season, we're like ripping throats out. And George was like, damn, you know how many years I fought to get that kind of stuff in my movies, and then it's on TV like, let's bite her throat out. That'd be great.
And what was the shift there, with the challenge of the MPAA, and then, of course, it's cable television, but do you think there was, is that the only shift you think there was? Because even on network television and even in R-rated films, you do seem to see them scooting the line back.
I mean, it scoots the line back because material is now more readily available. You can go on YouTube and see stuff.
That's true.
But it still kind of makes me laugh that you still can't say it here. You can't say the F word on TV. Like, they'll bleep somebody's lips. So, like, you can watch somebody get torn into pieces, but for some reason or other, somebody hearing that word is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to society ever.
It's the worst.
It is the worst. And what sucks is I can't say it because I really want to say it, but I can't because
I'm pretty sure one of us has already said it.
I probably said it. I'm trying. There was kids. So.
Right. Well, guys, do you have any more questions? We're going to need to wrap it up pretty soon.
You got two more questions. One here.
I guess as a practical artist, what do you think the role of digital effects is in movies and in TV? Because I say this as a digital artist who wants to be in this industry and do it right, and not overstep, I guess.
Well, okay. So last week in Hollywood, last week in Hollywood, they had a screening of Star Wars, 70 millimeter original print of Star Wars at the Motion Picture Academy Theater. So I took my son and we went and watched Star Wars on the big screen. It was amazing. And afterwards, John Dykstra, who was the special effects guy, and Richard Edlund, who did Ghostbusters and Boss Films, they were there afterwards. And he basically said, here's the difference between now and then. Then, George Lucas approached John Dykstra and said, this is what I want to do. I need to recreate a World War II dogfight with spaceships. Go. And they hired the best miniature guys, the best pyrotechnic guys, the best camera guys. It was like, you know, Magnificent Seven. They put the crew together, and then those guys figured out how to do it. And he said, you know, nowadays, computers are so clean. You can't make something look dirty because computers don't make mistakes. People can make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes turn into something amazing. And it really made me realize that that is what the industry is missing, in my opinion. Like when you watch a Marvel movie, which I absolutely despise Marvel movies, because they look like you're watching big giant video games. It's a big video game. You know that they're not standing on a set. You know they're standing in front of a green screen with a bunch of wires. So my suspension of disbelief is gone. So I'm like, there's nobody in jeopardy there. So the practical element is really what grounds the visuals in reality. And when John was saying the other day, he said, you know, we didn't know how to blow up a Death Star, or we just made a bunch of models, and he designed the camera move, how that the camera would do one pass with the model, and then one pass with the explosion, and one pass with the Death Star trench. They learned how to stick them all together. I mean, like, and it was because they put that group of people together. And I miss that. I miss that sort of Mission Impossible, light the fuse and get the best people together. I hadn't thought about it until John mentioned it the other night. So I texted him afterwards, because I'd worked with him a couple times, and I said, dude, that really, really hit home with me, because that is where you get to utilize your true artists by trying to come up with something that's amazing. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of it being there and being real.
And last question right here.
I'm losing them. Come back. Don't leave.
This is dealing with censorship.
Don't leave.
Have you found?
Oh, you're going to a
dealing
photo.
with,
Wait, you going to a photo op? All right.
Have you found dealing
hold on one
with?
second.
Oh, wait.
What photo op are you going to? You're doing the mall tour?
Mall tour.
Okay, the mall. There was zombies, and then there was a guy there. Tour's over. Right, you did great.
Yeah, this question deals with censorship. Have you found working with AMC to be a bit easier versus, say, if Walking Dead was on like USA, Sci-Fi, or one of the major networks?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we'd get memos, and they would say, you can't show this, you can't show that, and I always deleted them. It was kind of funny. So there was one episode that I directed. I think it was the season four premiere, where they're all leaning over. It was at Terminus, where Carol blows up the propane tank at Terminus, and 80 people get eaten by zombies. But it opens with Rick, Glenn, Daryl, all leaning over the trough, and the guy walks down. And so I kind of came up with that idea. So, because we were all there, I said, oh my God, and you can have one guy come up with a baseball bat behind Glenn, and you think Glenn's gonna get it, and Carol. So we built this rig to spray the blood. And we cut the scene together, and it was so gory, because it wasn't zombie violence. It was like, oh, there's these guys, and they hit him in the back of the head with a baseball bat to stun them, and then they cut their throats, and the blood drains into the trough. Kind of horrible. So we did the cut, and then AMC, the network, came back and said, well, this is too gory. You gotta take like 12 or 14 frames out, because the blood's just spraying just a little too far. You gotta take a couple frames out. So I went, okay, great. So I went into the editing room, took the frames out, sent it to the network, and they went, okay, that's great. And I told the editor, I put the 14 frames back in, and we're gonna air it that way. So they put the 14 frames, and nobody noticed the difference. I think they were just doing their job. Yeah, it's too gory. Just, it's like Amadeus. It's too many notes. Well, which ones would you like me to take out? I don't know, there's just too many. So I went, okay, so we went beep, 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 beep. And then that's great. And I went beep, 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 beep. And just put it right back. As one would do.
Guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Good up, Greg Nicotero.